There is a question that has haunted humanity for thousands of years. What is the meaning of life? From ancient temples in the East to modern laboratories in the West, this question lingers like an unhealed wound in the human mind. Thousands of philosophers, scientists, and theologians have tried to answer it. But today, we will tell the story of one man, a philosopher not as famous as Socrates, not as great as Kant, not as contemplative as Nietzsche. But in a small room in the German countryside in 1961, he wrote a strange manuscript, one that only 5 people have ever read. People called him Abraham. His surname unknown, his origin unclear, no biography. Only that he once taught at a small university and then suddenly vanished from the academic world. That manuscript bore the title, The Temporary and the Eternal, an answer to the meaning of life. 1. The question of the night. It was a late autumn night in 1959. The city of Leipzig was damp and cold. The rain was thin like mist, falling slowly onto the old tiled roofs of ancient buildings. Inside a historic lecture hall, a faint yellow glow spilled from small oil lamps hanging on the walls. A philosophy symposium was underway. 2 leading scholars of the time, one an existentialist, the other a structuralist, were fiercely debating the concept of being without essence. Their exchange was full of logic, sharp intellect, and emptiness. In the last row sat Abraham, a man with graying hair, quiet, unremarkable. He listened for a while, then silently stood up and left. No one noticed him. No one thought of him. And he didn't need them to. His footsteps echoed gently on the wet cobblestone street. A cold wind passed through, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and damp soil after rain. Abraham pulled his old wool scarf tighter around his neck, but inside, he did not feel cold. Instead, there was a quiet restlessness, the kind only known to those who have witnessed both the brilliance and collapse of belief. He thought to himself, the question is not what humans are. The real question is why they continue to live when they don't know what they're living for. His rented room was in the attic of an old house. The wooden stairs creaked beneath his feet as he climbed. The scent of old books, paper, and ink lingered in the air. There wasn't much inside. Just a wooden desk, a small bookshelf, a single iron bed, and an old window frame looking out toward a distant cemetery. It was in this very place, no noise, no city lights, no fame or recognition, that he began to write. Not for a publisher, not for any academic prize, but because he knew, if he didn't write, he would go mad from the unanswered questions gnawing inside him. Meaning is not found outside. The first sentence in his manuscript, written in bold black ink, in straight, decisive strokes, was a simple yet weighty declaration. No one can find the meaning of life if they keep searching outside themselves. Abraham did not intend to deny the greatness of science. He had once taught logic and was deeply fascinated by the works of Newton, Einstein, and even Freud. Nor did he reject religion, for he had once been a boy who attended church every week and knew both the Bible and the Torah by heart. But he realized one thing. Science can explain the molecular structure of a tear, but it cannot understand why we cry from longing. Religion can offer us hope for heaven, but it cannot answer why life in hell still continues every day. He wrote, "We are living in a world full of data, but starved of truth. A world that knows how to build atomic bombs, but not how to teach people to love each other when they disagree." Abraham once encountered a homeless man. A filthy face, bewildered eyes, shivering on the steps of a church. When Abraham handed him a cup of hot coffee, the man looked up and asked, "Why would you do that? I'm not worth anything anymore." Abraham stayed silent. Then he said, "If you ever had worth, you've never truly lost it." In his manuscript, he wrote, "All philosophy becomes hollow when the one asking is still suffering. And all answers are meaningless if they don't make the listener's heart tremble, even just once." Abraham did not believe that the meaning of life was something ready-made or bestowed. To him, it was a process, a journey. And anyone, if brave enough to sit down and face themselves, would begin to see light slowly creeping into the darkest corners of their soul. 3 questions everyone avoids. There is a section in Abraham's manuscript that those few who read it all agreed upon. It was the heart of his entire philosophy. It was when he listed 3 questions which, according to him, lie at the root of every existential crisis humanity has ever faced. What am I living for? If I die tomorrow, what will remain? Why am I aware of my own existence? 3 questions. They may sound simple, but they are questions very few people dare to sit down and truly answer with honesty. He wrote, "We learn how to work, how to earn money, how to compete, but very few ever learn how to live. The modern human mind is full of information, but starved of meaning. They know everything, except themselves." Abraham believed that the problem wasn't ignorance, but that we know too many trivial things, and not the essential. We know how to present, negotiate, communicate, and invest. But we don't know how to sit alone without feeling empty. He once told a story about a student, a senior philosophy major, intelligent, sharp, and full of skepticism. During a final seminar discussion, she looked at him with a slightly challenging expression and asked, "If you had to explain the meaning of life in one sentence, just one, what would you say?" The classroom fell silent. No one expected Abraham to respond. He looked at her for a long moment, and it wasn't clear if he was truly looking at her or gazing through the many years of his own life. Then he said quietly, "Live in such a way that if you were to die tomorrow, you would have no regrets." No one said anything after that. The student didn't argue back. She simply nodded, for the first time not trying to debate, as if something in those words had awakened a quiet place deep within her. Abraham later added in his manuscript, "Every person carries a flame within them, but most spend their whole life just looking for matches." These 3 questions, they are the way to ignite that flame, if only we are brave enough to stop avoiding them. Quiet encounters. In the middle section of the manuscript, Abraham recounts 3 encounters, not with scholars or philosophers, but with anonymous, ordinary, and quiet people. Yet he called them his 3 touches of meaning, in ways no book or system of thought could ever offer. The first happened on a cold, gray afternoon in Vienna. Abraham was walking past a square near the great cathedral. In a corner, a blind man was sitting, holding an old violin. He was playing adagio for strings with imperfect technique, yet each note seemed to flow straight from the depths of his being. The entire square felt frozen in time, even though no one had stopped to listen. Abraham paused, not because the music was beautiful, but because of something he couldn't name. He wrote, "Each note sounded not for anyone, not for money, not for recognition. It was simply born and then disappeared. In that moment, I understood. Meaning doesn't need to be proven." The second took place in a park in Lyon. It had just rained. Wet leaves clung to the paths. An elderly woman, perhaps 70, in a torn raincoat, was stooping to pick up shards of glass and scraps of paper. What made Abraham stop wasn't her hardship, but the faint sound of her voice, mumbling softly. Listening carefully, he realized she was reciting poetry by Paul Éluard, the wartime French poet. The line was, Je suis né pour te connaître, pour te nommer. Liberté. I was born to know you, to name you. Freedom. He followed her for a while, then stopped as she turned and looked at him. She said nothing, just nodded slightly, as if she already knew what he was thinking. The third was on an early morning in Berlin. It was bitterly cold. Abraham sat on a stone bench, wrapped in a wool scarf, lost in a passage of writing. A young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, walked by with his mother. He stopped, looked at Abraham for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small piece of candy and handed it to him, whispering, "You look sad. This will help." Without waiting for a response, the boy ran off. Abraham stared at the candy in his hand for a long time. And in the manuscript, he wrote, "I realized, meaning is not built by reason, nor must it be searched for in libraries. Meaning is found in moments that silence me, because I know if I speak, any words would only diminish them." A stunning revelation about temporary and eternal. In the next chapter, Abraham delves into a concept he believed to be the key to all inner conflict within human beings: temporariness. He wrote, "We don't suffer because life is too short. We suffer because we want it to last forever, even though we've never truly lived a single day in its entirety." According to Abraham, most of our anxiety, fear, and ambitions stem from the refusal to accept temporariness as a natural fact. We love and fear losing, succeed and fear failing, live and fear dying. Because deep down, we want everything to be permanent. But he argued, it is because things are temporary that every moment becomes sacred. If everything were eternal, you would never treasure a hug, a word of forgiveness, or a quiet moment shared between two people. Abraham divided time into 3 kinds, not mathematically or physically, but through inner experience. Mechanical time, the time of clocks, calendars, schedules. It repeats itself without soul. You wake up, go to work, eat lunch, go home. One day blurs into the next. Emotional time, when a single minute can feel like a year, or an entire afternoon passes in a flash. This is the time of crying, loving, anger, waiting. Soul time, when you know, this moment, I will never forget. It could be the last time you held your father's hand, the look in someone's eyes before they walked away, or simply a rainy afternoon, when you suddenly realize you're still alive. Abraham ended this chapter with a quiet sentence. I no longer wish for things to last. I only hope, if something must be brief, that it's worth remembering. The meaning of life is not a destination, but a way of walking. There is a passage in Abraham's manuscript that was often underlined, marked, and annotated by the few people who ever held it in their hands. A short, unacademic paragraph, but one that made readers pause for a long time after reading it. The meaning of life is not something to be found. It is how you live when no one is watching, no one is rewarding, and yet you live as if every moment were a sacred ritual. Abraham believed that the greatest mistake of modern humans is thinking that meaning is something like buried treasure, hidden somewhere in life, waiting to be discovered, requiring luck or needing guidance. but no one can point it out for you. Meaning does not come at the end of a long journey. It lies beneath your very next step, if you know how to walk with awareness. Modern people, in his view, are increasingly impatient with everything. We want quick answers, clear outcomes, a clever quote to nod at before moving on. But Abraham wrote, "Meaning is not an answer. It is a relationship between you and the sacred within you." He didn't define the sacred. He didn't call it God, didn't call it a soul, and didn't tie it to any religion or ideology. It was a silent part of us, the part that, when we truly listen, tells us what to do and how to live. Abraham once told a small story. One day, while walking through a field after the rain, he saw an ant slowly dragging a grain of rice 3 times its size. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't looking around. It simply, patiently pulled, little by little. He stopped to watch, not out of curiosity, but because he felt he was witnessing something real, something pure. That ant knew nothing of philosophy. It didn't care for grand goals. It just lived, with complete presence. And he concluded, if I can live without needing validation, without needing recognition, without needing to be remembered, then and only then have I truly lived. Abraham's final letter. In 1962, on a late spring day, Abraham vanished from academic life. There was no formal farewell, no press conference, no one to see him off. Only one person, Hans Meurer, an old friend and former colleague from his early university teaching days, received a handwritten letter. It arrived in a worn brown envelope with no ink stamp, no return address. The letter contained only 2 short paragraphs, but its very brevity made it feel like a final testament, an unnamed will, to Abraham's entire philosophical journey. Hans later recalled, speaking slowly, the paper had yellowed. His handwriting was still firm as ever, but this time it no longer felt like I was reading an argument. It felt like I was listening to a whisper from a soul that had finally understood what it needed. The content of the letter read, I no longer search for answers. I simply try to live as if I've already understood. And beneath that, in a small, slanted line, the only sentence he ever wrote in French. S'il y a une autre vie, j'espère ne plus demander pourquoi je vis, mais seulement merci, j'ai vécu. Translated, if there is another life, I hope I will no longer ask, why do I live? But only say, thank you, I have lived. Hans kept that letter in a small wooden box, never on display, never shared widely. Because as he said, it wasn't meant to showcase a great philosophy, but simply to remind himself each morning to live, not in search of greatness, but with fullness in every small thing. Abraham's story may not change the world. He didn't establish a school of thought. There is no philosophical movement bearing his name, no monuments, no articles in the press. But perhaps what makes him memorable is that he lived as if each day was an opportunity to listen to life, not to conquer it. Have you ever stopped just to ask yourself, am I truly living or merely continuing? Abraham left no advice. He left only a suggestion. Live in such a way that if you were to leave tomorrow, you would smile, with nothing left to regret. And if you are still searching for the meaning of life, start with yourself. You don't need to change the world. You only need to be honest with one lived day. Because sometimes living simply is the most profound answer of all.